Hey everybody, welcome to another Off the Shelf board game review. This week we're looking at Three Kingdoms by Starting Player. Now this is a three-player worker placement game, a very thematic worker placement game with a little bit of a twist that takes place during the 2nd century AD at the late stages of the Han Dynasty, where three various states were vying for control of China during this very troubled times. You have the state of Wei, the state of Wu, and the state of Shu, who were all competing, trying to take over control of China. And they're all fighting in various different ways. And if you're familiar with any of the games from the company called Cao Wei, which made a lot of PC and console games during the late 80s, mid 90s, and also in the early 2000s called Romance of the Three Kingdoms, you're about 90% of the way to understand exactly what Three Kingdoms is, except it's not a computer game. We now have a board game, a very, very classic game brought to the tabletop. In this very asymmetric game, players are going to be starting off vying for control of the state of China, but the very interesting thing is that this is a very asymmetrical game, showing the theme of the time where the Wei state was much more further along in their vie for power than the other two states, which means the other two states have to work together to cooperate in the early stages of the game. But this is a all versus all style game where every single state is vying for control. So those who are not quite as far along in the earliest stages must ally with their weaker partners in an effort to take down the Wei state. But the Wei state must always be very cautious of all their decisions, because as the game goes along, their power structure starts diminishing, while the power structure of their opponent starts increasing, which is very thematic and fitting of the status of the game and the time period which this game is trying to fit. In this game, every single player is going to control a general who's going to lead their armies, and they're various different, trying to go out there and trying to accomplish various different things to try to win the game. Now, there's many different ways you can win this game, but it is a point-based game, and the way various different ways players are going to earn victory points is by having armies on the board, trying to become the most powerful emperor by going out there and taking out areas on the borderlands, by keeping peace with the tribes on the various outskirts of all these nations, and also by buying these state enhancement cards as unifications, which will make their empire, their state, much more powerful, or purchasing these separation cards, which will also give them extra victory points at the end of the game. But there's a very interesting balance between these cards, because these separation cards, while they may give you extra victory points, they become much more difficult to get into play as the game starts going on further, while these current unification cards can make your state more powerful. But you also must balance whether you're going to buy your unification and your separation cards, because when you buy these cards, it's going to affect your final score, and it's also going to affect how powerful you make your state in the early stages or in the late stages of the game. Now, as I said, this is a worker placement game, but it's a worker placement game with a little bit of a twist. Because in your standard worker placement game, every single player is going to take one of the workers and they can put them on one of these locations, and whoever puts their work on a location first is the one who gets to take advantage of that location and get all the benefits of that location. But here's the twist that comes in Three Kingdoms. Every single one of your generals has a special amount of abilities, whether it's abilities for military or status for abilities of the powers of state, and that's going to allow them to take advantage of these various locations on the board. But every single player has a certain amount of status and how much power they have in each one of these abilities, and even if you're the first person to play your worker at a location, if somebody can come along and place a worker at a location who either alone has more powerful in that status, or if they put multiple generals in that location who exceeds your level, they're going to be able to take advantage of that location. You're going to be removed from that location and lose access to that ability on that turn. And here's a second very interesting thing about Three Kingdoms. Three Kingdoms is played out over 12 turns. That's the standard way the game's going to be played, but the game can come to a crashing halt all of a sudden if the game ends with one of the other victory conditions, such as one of the players becoming the new emperor of China, one of the players going out there and conquering up to 5 different border provinces and add these border provinces to their kingdom and winning the game that way, or if a player manages to get to level 5 in their marketplace and they're farming levels for their current empire. So that's a very interesting thing about Three Kingdoms. While your standard worker placement game is played over a certain amount of rounds and the game's going to come to an end, a player, a very astute player, is watching what the other players are doing and is working their strategy very, very well, can go out there and rush the end of the game very, very quickly and win the game in a very surprise victory against all the other players. So you have to be constantly watching the victory conditions of the game. You have to be constantly watching your current scoring of the game. You also have to be watching what your empire is doing to build your empire correctly so you can conquer China and either become the new emperor, win through a military victory, become the winner because you've created the best, most productive state, or you've just managed to outlast all the other players during the entire game. One other very cool thing about this game is as the game goes on, the Wei state is going to become weaker because they're going to be getting less and less generals to add to their empire, which is going to decrease the amount of areas they can cover in the game, while the other states are quickly, and as the game going on, continuing to get more and more generals, which is to give them more workers, allow them to go out across more different areas, allow them to hire more armies, allow them to equip these armies with different weapons, which allow them to take these warriors and these weapons and go out there and conquer different provinces, which is going to help them score extra victory points, and the more victory points you get, the better your chances are of winning the game. Now, if you want to learn how to play Three Kingdoms, be sure to check out my tutorial video where I'll explain to you how to play the complete game of Three Kingdoms. Or you can check out my complete gameplay video where I'm going to show you some gameplay of the game. I'm going to go through a couple different rounds, show you some different strategies, some different tactics, and show you exactly how Three Kingdoms plays. Finally, if you want, you can just bypass both those videos and check out my full video review of the game to get my final opinion of what I thought about Three Kingdoms. Now, if you enjoyed this video series, you want to see more like them, make sure you please hit that subscribe button. Also hit that like button. If you have any comments or questions, as always, you leave them in the YouTube comments down below. You can also feel free to email me at offtheshelfboardgamereviews. That's OTSBGR@gmail.com. As always, thanks for watching and thanks for subscribing.